Hi everyone, thank you for joining me today on episode 3 of 15 Minute Fridays. I am thrilled today to be joined by author and local friend of mine, Petronella McGovern. Hi Petronella, thank you so much for joining me.
Oh, hi Sandy, thanks for having me. We could almost do it in person, I thought, but anyway, we're still virtual.
I know, we're kind of almost there, aren't we? But I wasn't sure whether we should or we shouldn't, and then would people get upset? So we'll stick with it from our own living rooms for the moment. Next time we can do it in person. So today Petronella and I are going to be talking about what it's like to inhabit the editing cave. Petronella is just emerging from hers and I am deep in the middle of mine. So we've both got some insight here. But before we get started, I'm just going to put the giveaway up because I nearly forgot last week with Claudine. So I'm going to pop that up now and tell everyone what the giveaway is. So if you leave a comment or ask a question, you will go into the draw to be in the running for, dun, 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 the B format of The Cottage at Rosella Cove, the B format of 6 Minutes from Petronella, and, of course, some chocolate because we can't read without chocolate. Well, I can't read without chocolate anyway. And this is something you really do want to be in the draw for because in the back of this particular format of 6 Minutes by Petronella is the opening chapter to her next novel, which is very exciting. And that is the novel, I believe, Petronella, that you have been in the editing cave with these last few weeks. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. And I have this morning just finished the final proofread. I've just sent all the final changes back and it's going to print on Monday. So I feel like it's a party this weekend. Yay!
It's exciting. Do you have plans to celebrate?
No, I'll probably just clean the house, but
the glamorous life of an author.
Relax. I feel I've read this book, like every book you read so many times. So yes, I'm coming out of the other end, thankfully. Well, not thankfully, it's exciting. It's an exciting moment, obviously. I will have some champagne. I think.
Excellent. So this is your second novel that you are editing, second work of fiction. I know you've got some non-fiction as well. Has the process of editing been different this time around?
Yeah, I think it has, because I think I learned quite a lot in that when editing 6 Minutes. And 6 minutes, I joke 6 minutes should be called 6 years because, it took forever to write. Well, forever to edit, forever to 7 drafts. And I feel I learned so much in that process and working with the publisher and writing groups and various other authors that I felt I could really use some of that. And I think one thing I learned was in my very first draft, I had a lot of characters, and the people who read it said, oh, they're all interesting, but really there's a bit too many to keep track of. So I think in the second book I tried to have fewer characters and just make sure there's really a point to every character. And I think the first book editing process seemed to be more about character, and this one, The Good Teacher, seemed to be more about where to start the story, because it's another kind of domestic thriller, domestic noir, and whose point of view did you tell the story from, and where do you start the story?
Mm-hmm. How did you come to that decision then?
Slowly, maybe. I started when I very first started writing, and it's with editing, you're self-editing all the time. There's so many different moments of editing. So when I very first started writing The Good Teacher, I wrote it from a different point of view, and I probably wrote 10 chapters, and then I thought this isn't quite working. Oh, thank you, Jessica. I'll try it from a different point of view. And then that was good. And then I was trying to decide whether to start the story. It sort of goes over 6 months, but at what point to start the story? And whether to have it as flashback or in real time, chronological. And I was doing that sort of self-editing, but then also getting feedback from friends and writers groups, and then the publisher at the end of the editing process. Yes.
Yeah. Is that the scariest part for you? I know it is for me, is getting the publisher's feedback.
I think I've got a fabulous editors. So I think it's really interesting to see how people read your story, because how you write it and how you intend it what you think you're writing about might be something completely different to how someone else interprets it. So I think that's interesting when they pick up things. And I think also subconsciously, you're writing about different themes, and I'm sure this happens to you, and you don't realise till the end that actually you've touched on, I don't know, like in this new book, I seem to mention hearts so often, and I get to the end and I go, oh, clearly I'm talking about hearts in various ways. I won't do any spoilers, but there's a lot I went, oh, that's interesting that I've put that in everywhere. And, often the publisher or the editor picks that up and says, oh, look at that. Yes.
Yeah. So
where
am I up to?
Yes,
I'm
where are you up to?
The middle of the editing cave. I've got a little ways before I can emerge and have my champagne like you. I have my feedback from my publisher, and there is a fair amount of work to do. I've just finished doing a bit of an outline of where I need to go, and I'm just going to bring this over. This is my
oh wow,
my notes of what I have to fix. So I'm in the scary part of the editing where it looks, well, it is a massive, massive job ahead of me, and I'm a bit scared to start it. So I'm in that stage at the moment.
Yeah, I think I think the most rewarding point is when you sort of you go through all the edits and you get to and then you have this, often the answer like, why this isn't working quite right, can you fix this somehow? And then you need to figure out how to fix it, and then you figure it out, and it in a completely, like, you'd never imagined how that would work, and it is just like magic. In 6 minutes. No, sometimes it's just magic moments. Rarely, but sometimes in 6 minutes. With the editor said, "Oh, can you cut?" I think it was 6 characters and that's a lot of characters throughout the whole book. And one of them I didn't want to cut, and she said, "Okay, you can keep that character, but you need to change the storyline, that particular storyline for that character." And I thought, "Oh, how will I do that?" And then when I worked it out, it was so magical. I just went, that's just fits. It works for the character. It works for the story. And, it was a magical moment.
Okay. So, well, I'm still waiting for that.
Yeah, get to the magical moments.
Yeah, I'm waiting for that. I think I need quite a bit more chocolate ahead of me before I'm there. I might pop up. There's a few questions coming through, Petronella, so I might just pop those up. There's one here from Jessica, which I'll pop up on the screen now. What does your writing day look like, Petronella?
Well, Corona's certainly made a difference. I have a husband who's just working from home and on the teleconference all the time. So I just keep trying to avoid him however I can. I like the quiet. I'm not really an early morning person, but I find 6 a.m. is really quiet in my house. So I do often get up and do an hour. And that's, I think, when my brain's most switched on creatively. So I often do an hour before everyone else gets up and kids and school and everything. And then at the moment, so I do also work, do freelance writing and editing for companies, but that's all dried up. So I've just been, working through the day around kids and husband on teleconference and, So, and it's good. Like, I think I'm trying to start a new novel and I'm feeling it's a bit hard in this kind of, Corona environment to feel creative and inspired, but I have just started. And so having finished these edits and this proofreading, I feel I can get back to my 6 o'clock, and it's a good time to feel inspired.
Yeah. Given that you write in that domestic noir suspense kind of genre, do you think Corona will play into your next novel?
Yeah, I think.
Or are you going to stay away from it?
Well, maybe not the next one, but the one after I was thinking about. And I think I read something, and I think this might be true, that people won't necessarily be writing about Corona itself, but more about isolation and being locked in your house, and so I'd written an outline for another novel after this one, and and I realised as I was writing it, there was a lot about about being locked in with other people and not able to get out. So maybe that will be the theme for the next few years.
I'm just going to answer. It's not actually a question, but Caroline has not read you yet, Petronella, but I can highly recommend you, and there's been a few other people here as well, making those comments. Now, there's a question here from Ben Lee. I don't know if Ben Lee is a friend of yours, and this is an
I go to
inside
uni
joke.
with him. Yes, I'm doing a
Okay, so this is
master's.
probably
Hey,
an
Ben.
inside joke. Hi, Petronella. Editing cave, hey, ball of twine, help. Can you shed some light on what that means?
I'm not sure what you mean, Ben, but yes. I'm doing a master's in creative writing with Ben, and so we've been doing. So that's an interesting editing too, because I think we do short stories or chapters, and you get very different points of view from different feedback from people, and I think then the challenge is to work out what to take and what to leave when you're getting feedback from a whole class of people. Yeah, so it's been really good. Thank you, Ben.
How do you manage that? Sorry?
Thank you to Ben for popping in.
Finding feedback from different people can be a bit of a tricky thing to navigate as an author, particularly if they're opposing views. I remember very early on, before I was published, when I was in the query trenches and sending my work out, and you don't often get feedback when you're submitting your work, but a couple of times I did, and on the one day from 2 different agents I got feedback, which was like really, really exciting. One of the agents said the pacing is too slow. The other agent said this is moving too fast. And
that's impossible.
And I threw my hands in the air, and I'm like, I don't even know what to do with that. So when you get those opposing views, particularly, I mean, a class, I imagine you get all sorts of different views. How do you know which ones to listen to and which ones not to?
I think really you need to know your story, and you need to know where you think your story might be going. So I think it's hard at the beginning, when you're doing feedback, like early in the process, like if you've only just started writing the first chapter and you're not sure where it's going, then I think it's hard to work out which feedback is relevant. But I think the more you know about your story, then you can say, oh no, I know this is my theme, or this is where I'm going, and so I'll accept that feedback, but not that feedback.
Yes.
And I think, early on when you get feedback, it's too early. I know. I think I gave my very first chapter of 6 minutes to my husband, and I was so excited. I'd sort of started and I was underway, and then he works in communications too, and he came back with all these comments, which really I didn't need at that point. I just wanted him to say, "Well done, darling, well done."
Yeah. Don't solve my problems for me, just clap.
Yeah. So I think you also have to be careful about when you're ready to get feedback. Do it when you know the story a bit better yourself, when you're feeling confident. So I think that's important. Now, can I ask you a question, Sandy?
Of course,
so with your editing, you've got dual timelines. I assume you've got a dual timeline in this book. So how do you manage the editing in that process? Do you try and put it all in chronological, or do you still have it consecutively, or how do you work that?
I guess it depends which problem it is that I'm trying to solve. So the biggest problem with this next one, which is next year's book, the Wattle Island Book Club, the present thread, the present timeline isn't working. It's just not working at all. The elements are all there. The story is there, but it's just not coming together. So I'm actually going to separate that out and focus this next period of editing on getting that story right. And then when I put them back together, then I'll have to make sure it meshes and it flows properly. If I didn't have that big an issue with my present thread, I would approach the editing as if I was reading it like a reader, from beginning to end. For me, it depends on what the actual problem is. As I said, it's daunting. I know where I've got to go. I've just got to actually sit down and now make it happen. And I'm such a procrastinator. It's terrible. We've got another question here from Ben. It's a good question. How do we cope with an edit that size? So he's used to doing short stories. So we're talking, 360 pages, 400 pages, between 90 and 100,000 words, for stories of our size. It can be a huge task. So where do you start when you're tackling something that big, which can be quite scary? How do you start?
Well, I have a few small spreadsheets, but I know other people are much more organised than me. I'm not that organised. But I do have, I have in this one, I had a chapter list of 6 minutes. And then I had when whose point of view the chapter was from, what information was revealed. And I think particularly when you're doing a sort of domestic noir thriller thing, you need to work out who knows what when, and that can be an issue when you start, rearranging and editing. And in fact, last night when I was doing this final proofread, just checking for typos.
Don't say it.
And I realised there was like in movie making, a continuity issue where someone knew something that they shouldn't know something, and I'm like, no. Anyway, luckily it was one word. I just had to change one word. But yeah, Ben, still, you're in the final proofread and still things are. But I think the key is, spreadsheets and having a lot of, like I've got timelines of what's happening, and you must have timelines, Sandy, of both eras that you're writing in.
Yeah, I've actually just done my chapter outline and who's happening where and what year I'm in the past and those sorts of things.
Yeah. So I think there's having a lot of sort of supporting documents that that obviously the reader never sees because it's just boring to everyone else, but quite useful when you're kind of keeping track. Yeah,
and I had with the Banksia Bay Beach Shack, which is my current book out, my editor actually drew a map of the way I had described the town so that she could really get whether I'd actually moved people through the town correctly, and that was really cute when she sent that through to me, and she pretty much nailed it. There was like one thing out of place, so that was really great for me to see that I had actually described it the way I thought I had described it. We tend to think of maps in those fantasy epic sagas, but she actually did one for Banksia Bay, which was really kind of cool, I thought. So
yeah, and I think Silver, Chris Hammer's book, that he's got maps in it. He had someone drawing the maps and scrublands.
Yeah, right. We have a question here from Michelle. You're at book 3. That would be for me. Is this the hardest for you? Okay, I'll go first, and then there's a question for you there as well, Petronella. Book 3 was Banksia Bay. That was actually probably the easiest edit I've had to do. It was one of those stories that during the writing it came together, and then there wasn't a lot of work to be done with it. Wattle Island will be my 4th book, and I think it's going to be the hardest one to edit. I think probably because it wasn't as fully formed in my head when I started writing it as my previous 3 were, and so I'm still kind of finding my way into the story. So it's going to be a pretty awful edit, this one, and I think that just goes to show that every book's different. Some books come quite easily to us, some books we struggle with. So for me, I think this one's going to be the hardest.
Well, if it makes you feel better, I was going to say, The Good Teacher, I gave it to my writers group and they said, we don't believe the ending. So I rewrote the whole second half, last third. And then when I gave it to the editor, she said, I think you need to move the story to an earlier point. So then I rewrote the first third. So I felt like the middle third just stayed where it was. I'd rewritten most of the book by the time, Yes.
Oh no! It's tough. The editing cave. This is why we call it a cave, because we go in there and we've got to go deep, and it's dark and it's scary, and we're not sure if we're going to come out of it alive.
Yes.
And the second half of Michelle's question is, and you've touched on this a little bit already, Petronella. Have you got book 3 in mind, and if so, how far in are you?
Thank you, Michelle. Yes, you reminded me not far enough in, really. I was planning to have it, most of it written by now this year, but I feel, I don't know, the coronavirus seemed to have impacted how I felt about everything. And so I've written a couple of chapters, I've written an outline, and I'm at the getting excited point. So I think I'm bouncing back. I'm going to get there.
Okay.
I'll start writing properly soon.
That's good. Yeah, it's funny how the corona has, I think, impacted creativity, and I've heard this from quite a few different authors as well, because directly we haven't been impacted. No one in my family is sick, thank goodness. Nobody's stuck overseas or anything like that. But I think it's just that sense of fear and the negativity in the news constantly. I have found it really hard to get creative, and it sounds like you have too. It's a strange thing, isn't it?
Well, it's almost like you sort of feel, oh, what's the point when all this stuff is happening around us? But really, everyone wants a bit of escape. So yes, that is the point. That is
yeah,
the
but
point.
it kind of feels a bit trivial, doesn't it? When there's such issues in the world, and here's my little book. Yeah. Claudine's got a question for us. Hi, Claudine. Thank you for joining us. Do we feel overwhelmed by the editing? I think I've answered that. Yes, I absolutely do. I don't know how you feel, Petronella.
Well, Sandy talks about getting through it with chocolate. I said I get through it with red wine. But anyway, see, I do editing in my freelance work. So I always think there's there's always ways to improve the story. So I love that side of it, that it can always get better. The characters can get better, the story can get better, the structure. But I do, with all the deadlines, there is, you've only got a certain time to do it. Once you're in the actual publishing process. I was feeling a little overwhelmed. Mine keep coming over the summer holidays, so everyone else seems to be out having fun and being on the beach, and I'm like, stuck in an office somewhere trying to write a story. Anyway, that's okay. But I do think, I do love it when you get to the magical bit and suddenly it all comes together. It's just wonderful. And things you hadn't expected. That's what I love. Yeah.
Yeah, that is a pretty cool part of the process, I have to say. Ben would like to know, what are the hardest types of edits you've had to make, and how do you avoid happening it again? Oh, that's a good one.
That is a good question, Ben. I think it really is. It's those characters that I talked about in 6 minutes that I had to cut out, and I quite liked those characters, and I felt they were there for a purpose. But anyway, I did end up sort of combining some of their character with a different character. So I was sort of well aware of that, and it's hard to cut out 6 characters because then the information they bring in the story obviously still needs to be there, but it needs to come through someone else. So in the next book, I had a number of characters. I went, no, don't have that many characters. Just get rid of a few. And I think someone read it early and said, you don't need all these peripheral characters. So clearly I like having a whole community of people in my book.
Well, they're living inside our head. We want to share them with everybody, I guess.
What do you think's your hardest edit?
Yeah, well, as I said, this one that I'm doing now is definitely going to be... Oh, actually, no, Rosella Cove was pretty tough, which was my second novel. I changed publishers halfway through the process. My publisher moved overseas, and she had left me with her feedback, and I made all the changes that she had suggested. And then I got taken over by a new publisher, and she gave me her feedback, which was almost the opposite of what the other one. So I basically rewrote that twice.
Oh, that's hard.
So that was pretty tough. But I do feel you about cutting characters. In the Kookaburra Creek Cafe, which was my first novel, I had to cut an entire point of view from one of the characters, and it was heartbreaking. It was the right thing to do for the story, and I think that's what we have to keep in mind when we face those tough moments of editing. There's a reason that they've suggested that to us, and so cutting Dean's point of view was absolutely the right thing to do for the book as a whole, but it broke my heart personally to get rid of his point of view. And I don't know how I avoid making the same mistake again. I seem to just keep making different ones.
Well, it is interesting. I think that's the thing. You do something different and then you go, oh, now it's a timing issue or a point of view issue or there's so many issues we can have.
And they never stop. And I don't know if it gets any easier. Thank you, Jessica. I certainly intend on keep writing. I'm sure Petronella does too. We have a question here from Michelle. Have you always written during your teenage years? And if so, what advice would you give to your younger self, Petronella?
I've always written, but I often kept it hidden. And so I think I encourage people to, go into, library competitions and writing competitions and put their writing out there and start to feel like it's a real thing. Because I think I felt like it was just a secret thing I just did, that nobody knew about. So keep writing. I was laughing the other day because I said, when you're younger, you have all the time to write, and when you're older, but not the experience. And then when you're older, you don't have time to write, but then you've got the experience.
No, I would absolutely agree with that, particularly if you've got, when you've got jobs or children or both or aging parents or whatever the life situation may be for you. Yeah, you've now got the knowledge, the experience, and the desire to say something, but you don't necessarily have the time. So, yeah. When did you come out of the closet?
No, well, I did a writing course, like I did communication, so I was doing, at uni, I was doing some writing. But then I, got a job and made a living, and I still just put it to one side. I felt I had to make a living doing real things,
Yeah.
So I was always there on the side, but just trying to get to it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. All right, we've got our, now I don't know if you're going to be able to answer this next question, Petronella. I'm not sure how much secrecy is involved, but she would like to know if you can tell us anything about the good teacher. If you can't, that's fine. We can just hold Cassie in suspense.
Oh, I'm sure I can tell you a bit, Cassie. It's the story of Alison, who's a kindy teacher, and she has a sudden life change forced upon her when her husband leaves unexpectedly the marriage, and her teenage son, follows him, and she's left alone in this huge house, and everything she's been doing for the last 20 years, being a wife, being a mother, being a carer, has suddenly gone. And the only thing that keeps her going is going to school and teaching the kindy class. And she meets a little girl called Gracie, who's sick and grieving without a mother, and Alison takes her under a wing. But then the question is, how far is Alison stepping over the line of being a teacher, a mother, a carer, and what's her real motives? So, yes.
Ooh, well, you've got me hooked. I hope that's enough to hook you too, Cassie.
I'm hoping to do a cover reveal next week. So
it's very exciting. Looking forward to that. At the end, I'll pop up Petronella's socials so that you can be there for the cover reveal. Claudine wants to know what you're doing in your Masters. Oh, sorry, where? Not what? Where?
I'm doing at the University of Technology in Sydney. So we've been normally going in, but then we've been doing Zoom this term, which has been a bit strange. But anyway, that's okay. So, and I did my undergraduate degree at UTS as well. But it's quite different because I did quite a few courses through the Australian Writers' Centre and other places, and so the Masters is a lot more theoretical, whereas the Writers' Centre ones are much more practical, I've found. Yeah.
Okay. Are you enjoying it just as much, or is it a different type of enjoyment?
Yeah, I'm enjoying it. I think, but I see that it's a different. Like there's some people who I think, oh, maybe you'd be better off just going to the Writers' Centre rather than doing a Masters. So I think it depends where you're at in your writing and what you want to get out of it, I think. Yeah. Yeah. But I've met some fabulous people and having lots of fun.
Jessica wants to know what we're reading at the moment. So are you reading, or have you just been stuck in the editing cave?
I've been stuck in the editing cave, but I did read, now I've forgotten her name. Oh, what was her name? Western Australia writer, domestic noir, Sarah Foster. I just read Sarah Foster's book, You Don't Know Me, I Don't Know You. So no, I should have brought it downstairs. But it's set on the Northern Beaches, which is yeah. So I think that came out earlier this year or last year. Yes. So Sarah Foster, yes, which was very good, interesting.
And for those of you who don't know, that's where Petronella and I both live, is on the Northern Beaches. All right. I'm reading. I'm not doing very much reading at all because I'm, a little scared of my edits and I can't really focus on anything else. But I have started Kerry Turner's The Daughter of Victory Lights, which is a historical fiction. And I'm only a few chapters in. All right. Debbie's got a question. Have you got a drawer with a book or two or three or four, maybe, Debbie, that's not going to see the light of day, Petronella?
Oh, yes, Debbie. Yes. Yes. I've got a wonderful book. I'm sure it's wonderful in my bottom drawer. Yes, it took many, many years to write. That nearly got published, and just didn't. But now I look back I did pull it out, and my writers group read it, and it's interesting how. So I think it must be, I started writing it about 17 years ago. But how storytelling's changed, and how with so much more on TV and Netflix, I don't know, I think storytelling's a lot faster now. And I look at that book and it's a very slow book. So
yeah, right. Will you ever have another go at it, or is it going to stay in that drawer?
I think it'll stay in that drawer, but I do think the characters from that book could well be in my fourth book, because I was in an isolation book where they're all stuck in a house together. I'm thinking they will be the perfect people to be in that situation. So it may come in handy in some way.
Well, even if you don't use it, it's still handy. I think of my one that's in the bottom drawer that I know will never see the light of day in any shape or form. I consider that my apprenticeship. So it wasn't a wasted exercise to write that. I learned an awful lot about the writing process through that. So yeah, I don't think they're ever wasted, even if they never see the light of day. So we have a question here from Caroline, who wants to know, how do we edit one book while writing another? Is it confusing?
Yes.
Yeah, short answer.
Yes. I think that's why I've put off the new one. I don't know. How about you? I think I just put off writing the new one until I finished editing the other one.
Yeah, because not only are we writing one, editing another, we're promoting the one that's just come out. So we've actually got 3 books on the go at any one time. And yeah, I find it really confusing. I'm not going to start the one after Wattle Island until Wattle Island's edits are completely done and we're satisfied with them. I remember when I was writing the Banksia Bay Beach Shack, and I was doing all of the promotion work for Rosella Cove at the time, and I kept writing Rosella Cove every time I mentioned the town. And I'm like, no, you're not in Rosella Cove anymore. You're in Banksia Bay. So yeah, I got myself very confused.
Yeah, I did. I heard some advice, and it was said, make sure you finish your first draft of your next book before the other one comes out. So in July, 6 Minutes came out in July, and I did finish the first draft of The Good Teacher, and then I had sort of 6 weeks of promotion, so I just stopped, put The Good Teacher in a drawer and left it to so that worked well.
Yeah, and the other day I was doing an author talk and I completely forgot one of my characters' names because I'm so invested now in the one that I'm writing next week. A slightly embarrassing experience, I have to say. Michelle likes our idea of chocolate and wine helping us through our edit process. Got to get something to survive, right? Dixie, no worries to be late, Dixie. You can always go back, and for anyone else watching, you can go back and watch this once we have finished. So don't worry about that. Michelle loves the premise of The Good Teacher.
Oh, thank you.
And she would like to know when the release date is. Do you have a release date yet?
Yeah, it's the 1st of September. So, yes, hopefully we'll be, back to some kind of normal then, and we can do a real life launch. That'd be fun.
That would be so good. It seems like we've hooked quite a few people with Alison's story. Cassie is hooked, and she thinks it might be gut-wrenching. Are we going to need tissues, Petronella?
You may need a couple of tissues, yeah.
Okay.
Maybe.
Prepare ourselves.
Sorry.
You've hooked Shelley as well. She's nearly in tears just reading the premise. Oh, Shelley, you're going to be a mess by the time you read it.
Well, so talking of editing, I think at one editing point, I can't remember which one that was, I took myself away, before Corona, in the school holidays, after the school holidays, and I had 2 nights at a hotel by myself because I just couldn't focus at home. And I did start to feel like Alison because I didn't have my family around. I was alone in this hotel. I was eating by myself. I was just by myself all the time, and I wasn't ringing anyone because I was trying to edit. And I thought, I've just turned into my main character.
Oh no! Looks like we've hooked Jodie as well with the premise of The Good Teacher. So it's going to be a good one. I can't wait for September to come along. Sharon would like to know how much research you have to do for your books.
I do quite a bit, and I love researching, and I could just research forever, really. But sometimes you need to write as well. I did so for 6 minutes. I did a lot online, but I also spoke to about 3 different policemen, women, and detectives, and that was really interesting and they were at different stages of their careers, so it was interesting to get perspectives there. I had to do a bit of medical research for this one and the last one. I know a few medical people, so yes, that's useful. But I do find online there is so much information online. Like, it really is amazing, and you can go down so many rabbit holes. But yes, but you must have to do a lot of historical research.
Yeah, I do. It surprises me because I don't write historical fiction in the true sense of the word, but I do have those historical threads that work through my storylines. And I'm always surprised by how much research that I have to do. And even simple things that you think you know, but you don't necessarily. So when I was doing The Cottage at Rosella Cove, we go back to the World War II era, and you think you know about World War II because you learnt about it at school, and I didn't know as much as I thought I did. Like even like start dates and finish dates, I had to look those up. What was the communication like during those times? You know, between the husbands at war and the wives at home. You know, there were things that I didn't know. So I'm always surprised how much research I have to do.
Well, and
I don't know.
I was going to say even simple things. Like the other day, I wrote something about the organ player in a church, and I thought, I don't know how an organ player, you know, does she push the pedals? What does she do? And then I went and Googled all these organs. So then I listened to Game of Thrones played on the organ, and you know, went down the whole rabbit hole.
I know, and then you find a YouTube clip, and that leads to something else, and then
and really, it was one line. It was a one line.
Oh well. Dear. Yeah, the perils of research. Debbie said, Sarah Foster, you don't know me. That was
Debbie.
The book.
Yes, great book.
And we've got a few apologies for being late. That's fine, guys. It doesn't matter. As I said, you can watch it back. You can watch it back later. Now, of course, I have gone over my 15 minutes. Again, I always go over 15 minutes. It's a dangerous thing getting authors to talk about books because we can't stop. So I think we might leave it there. I'm going to pop up Petronella's details here so that we can all be ready for the cover reveal, hopefully next week. So we'll be stalking you. I think Michelle said she's going to start stalking you, but that's Michelle's hobby, is stalking authors. So she will be there. So yeah, there's Petronella's details where you can find her. Thank you very much for joining me. Thank you everyone for being here. The competition will stay open until midnight tomorrow night because the YouTube version doesn't come up usually until Saturday morning. So we'll give those guys a bit of a chance to pop some comments in, and good luck with the champagne drinking this weekend.
Well, good luck with the chocolate eating and the editing, and yeah, you'll come out soon. It'll happen. The magic will happen.
I hope so. I've got to get my backside in the chair. That's the biggest problem at the moment.
Yes, it is. Yes.
All right, so everyone have a good weekend. Take care of yourselves. Thank you for joining me, Petronella, and we will log off and you'll drink champagne and I'll go and eat some chocolate.
Okay, thanks, Sandy. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. See you.